He says, okay, that's fine.
It was a nice practice moment.
I
Yeah.
said, so sound excited like you just did a second ago.
There you go. Well, we have the technology working, everyone. Hey, welcome, everyone. This is our D103, our District 103 Toastmasters Senior Advisor webinar series. I am Cassandra, Diva of Dialogue Lee, your Senior Advisor for District 103. Senior Advisor just simply means that I am a past District Director. Having been in the role of district director has placed me in the role of an advisor. And I say as an advisor forever and ever, amen, for as long as our district leaders will need the advice, the support, the encouragement, and that sort of thing. I've been very fortunate for the last few years, and District 103 is still young. And we've had teams of leaders in District 103 who have definitely considered my opinion to be valuable, my support to be helpful, and also my contributions to be needed. And they allowed me about a year or so ago to start this D103 Senior Advisor webinar series. What it gives me an opportunity to do is to provide the district members, club leaders, district leaders even, an opportunity to have a variety of topics that are for your education and empowerment. Now, everyone, as I'm looking right now, I'm recognizing names that I know you've been members of Toastmasters for a while, which means you know how it is in the Toastmaster environment. We can only do so much in our clubs with our curriculum. We can also only do so much in a training for, say, for instance, club officer training or at a district event, meaning we've been having needs for other educational programming, and we just haven't had the time or even the space in some respects to do special programming. And that's where I came in. I saw a need last year to bring in some leadership training, some additional topics for our club and district leaders. And this year, we're keeping that progress going. Now, what I decided to do in December of 2020, I decided to bring this series back by featuring various District 103 members. So I started back in December and I brought in Shannon, I'm getting ready to say Shannon Word. I know that's not Shannon's last name. For those of you that know Shannon from Michigan Avenue, Courtney, help me out. Put her last name in the chat box for me. I am blanking, and if she was here, she would say, Cassandra, how can you forget me? Well, she was our second public relation manager for District 1. Thank you. I know, how can a Betty Wright, right? Shannon Wright. There we go. Shannon Wright. Thanks, Courtney. Courtney, help me with that. Shannon Wright is our former public relation manager, but she's also one of our District 103 members who use this Toastmasters program to really elevate herself personally and professionally. She was such an inspiration in an offline conversation that I had with her back in October that I was like, oh, I got to write an article about you. Well, the article was taking longer than I thought. And I said, hey, why not feature you in the D103 webinar series? And that'll give me an opportunity to bring the program back. So she was in December. January, I had two workshops. One was on free Toast hosts. The other was on virtual club recruiting. Now, both free Toast hosts and virtual club recruiting were done by two District 103 members who had actually presented those very topics at the June Toastmasters Leadership Institute. TLIs, we get a lot of education, but we don't always get a chance to attend every single session. When Dushan did his session on Free Toast Host, not everyone could attend. So I brought him in January to this platform. When Calvin Gibbs did his workshop on virtual club recruiting, not everyone could attend. That's why I brought him here to this platform. Today is no different. The individual that I'm featuring today is also someone who delivered at that summer TLI for District 103 back in June 2020. She too delivered a workshop that not all of us could attend. And that's why I'm bringing today before you Ansonia Gibbs. She's going to deliver her presentation on how to become a professional speaker, a podcaster, and a YouTuber. She's going to provide you with a wealth of information that I say, sit tight, take notes. And also, if you have comments, feel free to put them in the chat box along the way. Now, Ansonia Gibbs is a soon to be two-time distinguished Toastmaster. She is also a dual two. She is also a dual Toastmaster member because she belongs to a club in District 103 as well as a club in District 30. So she has been practicing her skills of being a speaker as well as now engaged in being a podcaster. And she's also going to share insight with you with her experience of YouTube. So I want you to be prepared. Ask the questions in the chat box. She'll also engage with you and let you know exactly when she'll do the Q&A. Yet for the most part, everyone, if anything she says resonates with you, I want you to use the reaction icons, the chat box. Let us know what you're thinking, what you're feeling, and the questions you have, and simply be prepared for an informative session that I think you will get a lot out of. And of course, because you're here today, because you registered, you will have the ability to receive the recording. So if there's anything that you're thinking you want to have access to or that you think you might miss, don't worry. It is being recorded, and I'm double checking. I'm eyeballing in the corner. I do see the signal that it is recording. So you'll have the recording. There will be a few special gifts along the way that you'll receive at the end. Yet the main gift that you are about to receive is in the form of Ansonia Gibbs sharing with you how to become a professional speaker, podcaster, and YouTuber. Everyone, show Ansonia some love with any reaction icon you want to use. And Ansonia, you can take it away.
Why, thank you so much. Hello, everyone. I am excited to be here and excited to talk about this because the topic that was given to me was a long topic, and I said I'd really like to challenge myself in doing that. I have a background in IT. I worked in school districts for over 20 years in technology and other positions. But when we think about the pandemic, wow. And the topic that was given to me was becoming a professional speaker during a quarantine. How do you do that? You know, you're wondering, you're trying to figure out what it is that you need to do. Well, the first thing you need to do is you need to find your voice. We've heard some of the speakers that stand before us and they speak so eloquently, and we've heard those that don't speak as eloquently. Oratory is the art of effectively delivering speech. The first requirement is to know that you understand your topic. Next, you need to parse and scan each sentence and then deliver what needs to be as a pitch. I'm taking that quote from Aidan Murray because he talks about being a professional speaker. And what I decide is I'd like to say you have to find your voice. And in finding your voice, you want to share and talk to people and not talk at them. Here are some various types of speeches that or voices that you can find. Are you looking at the individual slide or are you looking at the presenter's view?
Presenter's view.
Okay, and I will switch that to make sure that you see what. Now, are you looking at the individual slide?
Not yet, still presenter view.
Okay, then I will end the slideshow and I will present and I will tell you about the different voices because we have to continue talking. We have voices with which are a mentor or advisor. As I was a youth minister, which I kind of felt like I was thrown into that, but I realized that I was born into being a leader because I went through various leadership programs. When you're speaking, are you a mentor or advisor? Is that your voice? Or do you work with charm and humor? For those that have seen some of my presentations in one workshop I was doing, I backed up so far that I knocked over my background, but I still had to continue to present. I felt that that was a bit of humor that I interject, because I could have stopped and just thought of it as a catastrophe. Are you a credible speaker? When I talk to people about technology, especially in a school district, I was a very credible person because that was the knowledge that I held. You think about what kind of speaker you are, what kind of voice you want to have. Are you a locker room talker? There are some people that are. You feel that you have to communicate in a loud voice, and you have to be very expressive in being that speaker. Do you have a commanding or a firm voice? Or are you a crusader? There's some people that are crusaders who want to hear what others have to say, who want to speak for people who can't speak for themselves. If we think about people who are crusaders for animals and animal activists, that's a crusader when we think about that. Are you a storyteller? I like to think of one of the famous comedians that they don't really talk about much anymore is Mom's Mabley. She used to tell stories. And then Richard Pryor, when he would talk, although he wasn't a motivational speaker, he was a comedian. But Richard Pryor tells stories. If you listen to Kevin Hart, and I'm only talking about comedians because a lot of them tell stories, we can think about Les Brown. Les Brown tells everyone. Now, I want to know who knows who Mamie Brown is. By a show of hands, who knows who Mamie Brown is? Anyone? Everyone knows who Mamie Brown is because that is the story that Les Brown would pivot to launch into what topic he wanted to speak about. Or are you an arrogant speaker? Yes, we do have those that are arrogant speakers who want to make sure that they get their point across no matter what. I'm going to ask right now because I like to have communication. I'm going to ask one person to put their hand up and tell me what kind of voice as a speaker do you have of those that I've already named. I do have a few more voices, but can someone share what voice they have? Anyone on here? Okay, I'm going to pick. Okay, Natalie.
Valerie. Okay, and Valerie Lyons as well.
Okay. Natalie, you go first.
Okay, listening to you with all of the voices, something that I've taught in workshops myself before to other individuals. I would probably start off by saying that I'm probably a combination of these things, but if I had to pick one, it would definitely be a storyteller. I got my start listening to Les Brown, going to hear him, being fascinated by what he was sharing and how he delivered it. So I find that that storytelling aspect really resonates with individuals because it allows them to see you as an individual. It gives your credibility at the same time, but it also opens them up to sharing and being engaged in your particular workshop or speaking engagement.
Thank you so much. Valerie?
Hello.
Hi.
I am more of a storyteller. I've been writing since I was a young child. I always created my own stories. When I give speeches now, I tell a story to relate to whatever topic I want them to understand. So I'll tell them some short story and then relate it to the topic. And then everyone says, ah, and they understand what I'm trying to say.
Great. Now, there are other voices as well, not just the voices in your head, but there are other voices as well that you can speak. Some people have a sales voice. That's what they're doing. They want to sell you on what they have. How many people have gone to a car dealer and the car dealer and the car dealer comes to you and they're trying to sell you a car, but they're not just trying to sell you the basic car that you walked in the door looking for. They're trying to sell you an upsell. And I'll just give you one quick thing on someone that did something to me, because there are some people that look down on women and not understand their understanding. I like the cars, and I'm trying to think of the name of Saturn. I love Saturn. Fantastic car. I go in to get my Saturn SL repaired, just getting the oil change. The salesman sees me in the lobby and tells me that he said, "What kind of car are you looking for if you're thinking about upgrading?" I said, "I think I want to go to an SUV. However, Saturn doesn't have an SUV." He said, "Oh, yes, we do." And I said, "Really? When did that come out? Because I know it's supposed to come out 2 years from now. It's not currently." "Oh, yeah, we have one." The man walked me over to a station wagon and tried to sell me a station wagon instead of an SUV. Well, needless to say, I had a few choice words for that gentleman before I walked out of the showroom and went back to go get my car. But that was his spiel. He was a salesperson. That was his voice. Could you be a seductive speaker? There are those that are seductive speakers. Think about the kind of voice that you want to have. Technical. As I mentioned, I am credible and I have technical background, so I can go and present in a technical environment. Are you philosophical? Or do you present fear when you speak? Think about these things and how your voice or how you want to present yourself as a professional speaker. You want to make sure that your voice is heard and your message is heard, but you don't want to get up there and, as Natalie mentioned, she used to listen to Les Brown, but I'm pretty doggone sure she doesn't go out there talking like Les Brown. So you think about your personality, your persona, and never want to talk to an audience. You don't want to talk down to your audience ever. You always want to talk with them, have a communication. You want to find a common ground. Why did they come to hear you speak? Why are they there? Why, if it's a paid engagement, why did they pay to come in to hear you speak? Think about those things. Think about what you have to offer as your voice. Now, when you think about getting started as a speaker, you want to define your area of expertise. As I mentioned, I have a background in technology. I could be a professional speaker in technology and talking about the basics or what have you. And some of you have seen that I have done presentations on certain technical aspects, software products. So I had that expertise. You want to identify your target audience. Nobody wants to go and speak to an audience of senior citizens and talk to them like children. Because when you talk down to senior citizens, you will offend them. And what will they do? They'll turn you off. They'll walk away and they'll feel unsatisfied. Just as you don't want to talk to children in the 5th and 6th grade like you would talk to college students. You want to make sure that you talk with your audience, that you know who your audience is before you prepare to go out and speak, and who you'd like to focus on. You want to gain your public speaking skills, which all of us who are a part of Toastmasters, you're gaining your public speaking skills. When I initially got into Toastmasters, I only thought of it as the leadership track because I was a leader in technology. I had a team of technicians, and my supervisor told me that I was a poor leader. And I decided, okay, I'm going to learn how to increase my leadership skills. So I joined Toastmasters not knowing that I had to give a speech in order to get my CL. Well, over 100 speeches later, I actually started a tour because I really didn't want to give speeches, and my tour was called Never Giving a Speech. Well, I wound up and I've given over 100 speeches, and I probably am closer to 200 speeches by now. But you want to gain public speaking skills. At every opportunity that you can, try to see if you can hone your skills by speaking publicly. You want to learn the art of speech writing. One of my girlfriends is a principal at a special needs school. And we were talking, and she said, I really don't want to write the speech. I got to talk to the parents and blah, blah, blah. So the volunteer in our house, Mr. Gibbs, said, I'll write a speech for you. That is honing skills of something else. So you can be a speech writer for someone else. You know that a lot of people that get up before people may not be the ones that actually wrote the speech that they're giving. Think about that. Think about being a speechwriter for someone. If you have great writing skills, if you can motivate people through your words, but someone else wants to speak, think about that. That's another way of becoming a professional speaker, but you would become a professional speechwriter where you can help others who have a difficult time in gathering information or may not have the complete time to pull all the information that they need. You want to create a professional presence online. We all know we're on Zoom now, but let's say when we were in 2019, 2018, how many of us really thought about creating a presence online? And you think about these because when you're online, you can reach so many more people than just your regular group. When we were out in meetings, a lot of people just met with their group, just met with their club. They didn't go out and experience. But with online, create a professional online presence, whether that be creating a YouTube page, and we're going to talk about that, whether that becoming a podcaster, we're going to talk about that, or if you're just writing motivationals. I'll just tell you a bit about, I did transition into becoming a podcaster. I have a guest that came on, and she used to write daily affirmations, just a little notes, affirmations, and she turned those daily affirmations into a book. So she has written a complete book of her daily affirmations. Someone told her, you've been putting it online, why not put it in a book? And that's what she did. So those are some things to think about as well. To become a professional speaker, seek local events. Maybe they're doing a open house. I understand someone I was reading on Facebook, their nephew opened a restaurant. That was an opportunity to come out and speak before a crowd and talk to them and talk them into going to her nephew's restaurant to eat. So those are some things that you can look at. Attend networking events. You want to make sure that you network with people. You don't want to be a hermit. When you network with people, you find other things out. You learn that there are so many places that you can go and speak. You can go and speak at a graduation. You can go and speak at a ordination. Just think about these things where you can, but you want to make sure that you have realistic expectations. Don't go out and think, oh, I'm going to go out and I'm going to tell these people, you tell someone, I want to speak. And they say, well, how much do you charge? And you say $10,000. That's okay. So have real expectations. Many times you have to speak for free. There are times where people will give you a gratuity, or they will give you I'll just say it from the church, they'll give you a love offering. So when you think about these things, don't have high expectations. Someone that goes out and speaks, and I know that everyone knows Oprah Winfrey, of course, but Stedman gets $20,000 to go out and speak. And you want to know why? It's not because he's with Oprah. It is because that man has built his business. He has built up to that level. He goes out and speaks to corporate companies. He's able to charge $20,000. So if somebody says, can you come and speak? He's able to charge $20,000. So when you think about this and you go to a place where you can earn that Make sure that you have your expectations. Don't think that you're going to come galloping out of the box and you are going to hit that top dollar. You want to build up to that. Just to have those kind of expectations, but make sure that you have realistic expectations. Don't try to oversell yourself. I recall, and I'm trying to think of he was a keynote speaker for District 30, where he mentioned that he had gone out after he won the contest, and this was his first big gig. He was going to corporate, and he gets there, and they tell him they're going to give him a $10,000 stipend, and he's really excited and exuberated about it. And he got out there and he admitted himself, he gave them a $5 speech. How devastating is that? That could crush someone's career. You're trying to go out and be a professional speaker, and then you go out there and give your audience a $5 speech. And he said he was ashamed of himself. So when you think about these things, build up, learn how to grow, learn how to develop, learn how to speak on different levels. Make sure you're the expert in the room. When you're talking and you're speaking from the stage, you want to make sure that you're the one that commands the attention, respects the people that are there, to give them your best. Always give your best. Now, if you're thinking about making a career as a public speaker, learn to negotiate your fee. If you don't know how to negotiate your fee, talk to someone who has done it. Talk to people who have gone out and been able to negotiate their fees, know how to discuss or communicate with the key people. Don't just go out there and somebody say, well, we're going to give you $2,000, when actually, if somebody else came along, they were going to give them $15,000. Learn how to negotiate and figure out what your worth is. And then don't stop promoting your speaking services. At any given time, promote your speaking services. And I'm going to have to use this guy because I can. Calvin went to a corporation and he spoke to them and said, I would like to present at the next company meeting. Well, what do you want to speak about? He gave a couple of topics. You went to the HR person, gave them a couple of topics. And they said, well, we can't pay you, but sure. But guess what? That was a corporate company that was a Fortune 500 company. And when you talk to someone who is in that position, you do a good job, they're bound to go to their constituents and say, hey, if you're looking for a speaker, especially on this topic, why don't you check out so-and-so? So what did he do? He went out, I see what he wrote. He went out to promote his speaking services. And yes, they did have the money, but they didn't want to pay him, but that's another story. And then you want to master the art of selling from the stage. And we'll talk more about that later, about mastering the art of selling from the stage. But you don't want to be pesky. That's something, it's just like a minister. And if anybody on here is a minister, I apologize, but I have been in church for years. I've been in a lot of different churches. And the quickest thing to turn a person off is to pester them. How many have been at a church and the pastor gets up and say, well, we need to take a collection and we need to have X amount of dollars, and I need 50 people to stand up with $100. And people are looking around and they're like, okay, so you can't get the 50 people to stand, but you want to continue to hold that line. Learn how to sell from stage, but not pester people. And then the pastor would stand there, whether it be a man or a woman, would stand there. And if they didn't get 50 people to stand up with $100, then they go down to the $50 people. And then they, keep going. And you have to remember that, think about you as being part of the audience. You know that there's a product that you have that you'd like to give over to people, but you don't want to be pesky when you do that. And then you want to find ways to monetize after your speech as a professional speaker. And I know that a lot of people have noticed that when you go to the conferences, that the keynote speakers always have a table where they're selling their items. And that is how you monetize. That's how you monetize, whether you've written a book, whether you have a recording of some of your events, whether you have given speeches and you've written those speeches out and it would, fit into other people's plan. Think about those things. That's how you monetize. And then, of all things, art imitates life. What do I mean by that? When you are a speaker on stage, you don't want to stand in one spot and be stagnant. You want to think about your staging. It's always recommended, get to the location early, preferably when you can get in the room by yourself, so you can fill the room out. But mainly you want to fill the stage out. You want to figure out your staging. How are you going to do your blocking? That's a artist term. Those are for actors. But if you're thinking about a speaker, you also have to think about your staging. You don't want to stand in one spot because it'll put people to sleep. You want to make sure that you're doing something enthusiastic to keep people engaged. You want to make sure that you check out the sound system. That's another thing. People go in and you hear that loud beep. That's because sometimes you have not had the opportunity to work with the sound system, or maybe their batteries are going out and you have to have that fixed before the program or before you speak. Learn what is the right stage, the left stage, or I'm sorry, I'm saying it incorrect. Learn what is stage left, what's stage right, what's center stage, and what's upstage. Is that it, Calvin? That upstage. So there are plots in a stage that you can find your way, but make sure that you don't walk away from your audience where they can't see you. And another thing that is a good way to lose your audience is to turn your back. You lose your audience when you turn your back. If there is something going on, try to signal someone to correct an issue, but you definitely don't want to turn your back, especially if you're in the middle of a story or if you're in the middle of an emotional moment that you're sharing with your audience. Never turn your back on your audience. You want to make sure that you continue to keep eye contact. If you can't look at everyone in the audience, pick one person out and constantly get eye contact with them. Look to the back of the room. You want to make sure that you're projecting to everyone. So if you think about the last person in the last seat, as Mr. Gibbs always told his actors, think about the last person in the last seat. You want to make sure that they can hear you, but you don't want to shout at your audience unless that's the kind of expressive person you are. You don't want to shout at your audience because that can turn people off as well. Shouting and being over expressive can turn people off. So you want to think about those things as far as becoming a professional speaker. Now here's something, and I'm going to transition because these kind of go together, is you want to create your brand. Your brand is something that is going to speak before you even walk in the room. What is Cassandra's brand? Can someone raise their hand and tell me what Cassandra's brand is? Sharon Giles, unmute yourself and tell us what Cassandra's brand is.
She is the diva of dialogue.
Absolutely. And you want to make sure that your brand is meaningful. You want it to communicate the essence, that it conjures an image, because when someone says diva of dialogue, the very first person I think of is Cassandra. Although there's a young lady out there that's trying to use diva of dialogue as well. So you better get on that. No, just kidding. I found her. And then you want it to be distinctive. You want to make sure that your brand is distinctive. It's unique to you, that when people talk about it, they're going to remember you. Whenever it's brought up in any kind of conversation, the very first thing that someone's going to think of is you. When you think of that, and then you want to be accessible. You want your brand to be accessible. You want it to be easy to interpret. Diva of Dialogue is telling me that she talks, she presents, and that is what is eluded from that brand. And then you want to make it protectable. And what do I mean by that? You want to make sure that you protect your brand. And when we think of a domain, you want to get a trademark, you want to get a domain. Even if you don't get a website just yet, you want to get that name out there. I was telling a gentleman that not long ago, he said he's picked a name, but he doesn't know what the steps are. I said, well, if you ever decide that you want to get a website, you want to get that domain name, and you want to get that and put that in brand and then trademark it, or vice versa. But I would go online first because there's so many places. Calvin and I had a theater company. We ran a theater company, a nomad theater company, for over 12 years. And when I stopped hosting the website, someone snatched up the name and then wanted to charge us $1,000 to get it back because we had shut down our theater company. And I'm like, really? $1,000 to get the name back? You can have it. But you want to make sure that you protect yourself in that. And you want to make sure that it's future proof. You don't want to say, let's say now, 2020 is me. Okay, we're 2021. So is that really future proofing it? No, not really. So think about something that is going to keep you and take you into the future. And you want to make sure that it is visually attractive. When you create a logo, you want that to be visually attractive. And I'll show you later on something that I did as far as me becoming a podcaster. So you want to make sure that it is visually attractive, that you can translate, communicate through designs, and have icons and logos. Okay? Any questions so far? I know I've seen some pop-ups of some things, but are there any questions so far?
There were no questions specifically, Ansonia, simply comments that came in. Yet everyone, if you do have a question, why don't you go ahead and use the raised hand feature? That way we'll be able to see you as we're in gallery view. We'll be able to see you better and make certain that we see those raised hands. That way you can audibly speak unless you want to go ahead and type your questions inside of the chat box. What I'm doing right now is scrolling through my images. I don't see any raised hands to represent questions. I do see a comment that came into the chat box. Look at all of these thumbs ups, and I should say all of these websites with the branding going on. Natalie put a brand in. We saw Michelle says she's just come in with her brand information as well. Yet no questions so far, Ansonia, no questions.
Okay, no problem. Then I will continue. Now, we're going to transition now into YouTube podcaster. I'm going to put those on the same level. I'm sorry.
Hey, Ansonia, I do see right now Courtney's question came in as you were about to start. Would you like for me to share it with you now or save it for later?
Yes.
Her question is, how do you discover your brand?
Well, that is something that you have to think about after you've discovered your voice, the audience that you'd like to speak to, and think about what you're passionate about. I have, because I call myself I can't say jack of all trades, I'll say Jackie of all trade, because I've done so many different things in my lifetime. And I had a dilemma of if I wanted to talk about technology. Did I want to talk about technology? Or did I want to talk about one of my greatest loves is singing? And for years, I sang with recording choirs, and I sang with a lot of great gospel artists. I started off as a kid singing and not realizing that I was singing around great artists and learning how to hone that craft. And I've actually shared with one of my relatives not long ago that when I was younger, I was approached by some people that wanted me to actually go into becoming a professional singer myself, a soloist. So I prayed about it and I asked the Lord to talk to me and tell me what would be my decision. I chose to talk about gospel music, and that's what my podcast is about. And we'll talk about that a little later. But my podcast is called Let's Talk Gospel Music Gold. And that is my brand because that is what I'm passionate about. I can talk about it and I know a lot about it. And I've been sharing, and that's what I share on my podcast. And like I said, we'll talk about that later. So less about me, more about this. That's how I found my brand. Whatever inspires you to find your brand, whether it's walking around the house, if you are, and then I'll get to that, you think about your content. So I hope this is still answering your question. You think about your content and who you want to reach. What do you want to say? And will you do interviews when you think about this? Even speakers, professional speakers, they do that sometimes. They speak with people. But think about what your niche is. And that is a word that is just going around. It's been around since 2000, I think. I'm not sure because, I'm not that young. No, just kidding. But when you think about your niche, are you a good cook? Can you share cooking tips? Do you do repairs like home repair, auto repair, or you have little knickknacks around the house and you figure out how to fix these things without having to call an expensive service person to come in and fix it? Do you have a green thumb? I personally do not have a green thumb. I was taken off plant duty very early on because I killed a cactus. But I will say that this, you see my plant here, is I got it from a dish garden and it was about that big. I still have no idea what kind of plant this is. And maybe I'll talk to Sharon about that. I still have no idea what kind of plant this is, but it is currently, and I am just so excited about this, it is currently over 6 feet tall. So, but I don't have a green thumb. That's about the only thing that has survived out of all the plants that I've had, but that is the only thing that survived. And then, are you a person that can talk about lifestyle tips? Is there something that you have more knowledge on? Some people, I went to the internet, YouTube, and found out how people do twists with the pandemic. I usually have a press and curl. And since I was at home, I said, man, this is just really ridiculous to have to get up and curl my hair every day. And my husband said, why don't you just leave it wet? Because when my hair is wet, it's curly. So I said, well, I can't just have it stand all over my head and being unruly. I went to the internet because someone had lifestyle tips that taught me how to twist my hair. So now it's still neat. And as soon as I take a shower and I can just twist my hair back up and it is not a problem. Think about what you have to offer. Think about what you like your audience to be. So that's how I picked my brand. And not that I had lifestyle tips, but Now, when we're thinking about YouTube and or podcasting, you can do a solo show. Some people can talk for a half an hour, 45 minutes, 20 minutes, all alone and keep the audience's attention. And kudos to you. I tell Derek I took his word because I told him stop saying that. But great if you can. And you can support that and you get an audience that grows. Or do you do interviews where you bounce ideas off of your guests? You bounce out ideas off of others. You might have someone in the studio with you, or you might have someone who you're Zooming with that you want to bounce information off of. Those are great. YouTube shows and podcasts. Better podcasts because YouTube, a lot of people do solo type events. Or if you decide to do a co-host. Now here's where this can be a little sticky. In YouTubing and podcasting, if you get a co-host, you have to remember that you have to share ideas with another person. You all have to come together with a schedule. You then become business partners because eventually your podcast or your YouTube channel will grow and you will transition into monetization. So when you have a business partner, you're going to have to think about these things. Think about if you want to share with somebody 50-50 and they have to have shared responsibilities. So you think about those things. When you decide as a speaker, as a YouTuber, as a podcaster, the first thing you want to do is you want to sketch out over 100 ideas. Jot them down, put them in a journal, write them out, think about it. Because when you start presenting, you want to have enough material to keep you going so that you don't just do 5 shows and stop. If you're a YouTuber or a podcaster, make sure that you have enough topics. Do some research. I myself do interviews, and there was a time when I didn't think I would have enough people that would say yes. I was really surprised that I had so many people that said yes, they would come on my show and talk with me. But I also have another plan that on occasion I'll be doing a solo show, but I'll be featuring certain things. Think about that. You also want to set a schedule. I heard Cassandra mention at one point that Wednesday is Toastmasters Day. That tells me that Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, she has scheduled out something else. Set a plan, set a schedule. If you're doing a YouTube or a podcast, script your show. You don't want to be sitting in the middle of a field, hemming and hawing, because you don't know what you were supposed to say or where you're supposed to go. So you want to write these out. If you're doing an interview, schedule your guests in advance. Make sure that you have the material. You don't want to be sitting somewhere in a studio on the day of and nobody shows up but you. Or you don't want to be on a Zoom session and you're the only one there. Make sure that you schedule your interview if you're interviewing people. And if you're a co-host, you want to sync your ideas with your co-host. You never want to go into, that's just like a husband and wife. The husband wants to go to Jamaica. The wife wants to go to New York. Wow, where are you going to go? Because they're not right next door to each other. You have to come to a concise decision as to what you're going to do. You have to make sure that you're cohesive, even in your path. Now, I want to share this, and I'm hoping you may see the beginning, you may not, but I want to share with you a sample of a schedule. And are you looking at my desktop or are you looking at my show?
I can see the PowerPoint. It's not yet in show. It is the PowerPoint deck though.
Okay. And of course, I need to go to that slide because guess what? You know, as much technology as you have, you always have to come to a concise decision as to what you want to present. Now, this is a show sample of, you've decided that your topic is going to be Jennifer Gibson turned a nearly bankrupt spa into a $50,000 a month machine. Wow.
Some reason it's not very clear.
The writing?
Yes, well, yes. I mean, the topic, how Jennifer Gibson, that's clear. But when you have these little different...
that's just, we're just looking at the front. Just look at the white writing.
Okay.
Okay. And then you want to start planning.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to say, oh, I'm going to do a show tomorrow about so-and-so. You want to start planning. Then you want to record. I strongly advise to do recordings because there are times when when you're doing an interview session where you will have to edit some of what they say. I'll give you an example. One of my guests, and we were talking about a specific topic, and this person blurted out someone's name. And this was a name that could actually come back and bite you. So I said, now, you know, I told you we can't mention names, but I'm going to have to edit this out. So you always want to make sure that you record to give yourself enough time to clean up if you need to. Those who are fortunate enough to have an editor, you would then send your recording to your editor. And then you would schedule when you want that to post. And just another, and then you decide, okay, I'm going to publish it on October 29th. So we've gone from, I've got a title. We're going to do the interview. We're going to start planning the show on the 8th of October. And then we're going to record it on the 12th. I'm going to send it to the editor on the 15th. And by the 22nd, we're going to have the page content ready. And we're going to publish it on the 29th. So these are some things that you have to think about when you're going through a process of setting a schedule. Now, this young man, Roberto Blake, is very informative. He's been there since the late 90s, early 2000s. So he is what they call a podcast influencer and YouTube. So he indicated how he scripts his show. Some have sponsors. Those are people that are going to pay you to post it on air. You're going to create an introduction. Some have musical jingles, sound effects, longer explanations of what's going on. And then they're going to talk about their topics, and they're going to go and do their sporting. Does it sound almost like a Toastmaster speech? So you're thinking about these things. Then you're going to have a segue, because if you have a long session, like let's say you have an hour session, you want to make sure that you give not only your guest a break, but yourself a break. So you're going to do a segue. And then you're going to come back to your second topic, and you're going to discuss that. You may want to interject a sponsor message and then bring up the third topic, or however you want to. You can segue and then do an outro. So these are some things about when you're thinking about scheduling and creating your script. Make sure also to do a call to action. A call to action, we have speeches in Toastmasters that tells us that you want someone to do something. So at the end of the show, what is your call to action? What do you want people to know? Do you want them to know that this is the first and last show that you're doing? Do you want them to know that you're a show that's growing and you want to develop? Do you want to let people know, what do you want people to do? Do you want them to tune in at the next episode? Make sure you let people know that. Now, getting a sponsor sometimes is not as easy. And I do know that various platforms, depending on the service, you can't go over 30 seconds in your sponsor messages. So you have to speak for a while, then do another sponsor, etc. So you would have to learn that through your platform. Now, this is show and tell time. I like to talk about the equipment that people use. And I have in my little surprise box here. I did some research. When you talk, you want to get a microphone. And I'm sure this box is really not telling you a whole lot other than USB microphone. But you want to get a microphone when you're thinking about this. And you think about what you'd like to present, how you'd like to speak. I'm not using the external microphone today because I figured I got enough stuff here on my desk. But when I'm doing my show, I always set up my microphone. You want to make sure that you have a good camera. I've added a webcam. I have a webcam on my laptop, but I've added another webcam to get more clearer and more in depth. Headphones, if you'll look, some people have headphones on. And the reason why you want to have headphones is because you want to hear what your audience is hearing. So while you're recording your show, whether it be a YouTube or podcast, or if you're practicing your speech, put your headphones on, listen, not the earbuds, because those slip out of your ear. I see RJ, is it R3 Sings iPad? Cassandra has on, Sharon has on headphones. Those are the type of headphones that you want to use. And you want to think about lighting. Well, I've got a couple of different versions of lighting. As a matter of fact, before we get started, I readjusted it. But get lighting. You want to make sure that people can see you. You definitely don't want to be in the dark. And here's another hint, everybody. And this goes for Zoom when you're in your meetings or anytime. Make sure your light is behind the camera, not in front of you, not behind your back. So this is a light. I also have a stand that I connect this to, and it is a wonderful light. It's a professional LED light, which adjusts. So if it's too bright, I can turn it down. I have an overhead light that sometimes make me look orange or blue. So you want to make sure that you test yourself out, because when you present yourself in, and this is YouTube, this is for people who are doing YouTube, you want to make sure that you present yourself in the best light. Does that make sense? And you think about how you want your audience to see you. You want to make sure that you have a good camera, you have good lighting, you have headphones, and you have a microphone. That way you'll make sure, I know everybody likes those ring lights, but they really make you look like you've got white eyeballs. And then for those of us who wear glasses, you want to make sure that you adjust so that the light is not, that all people see is the reflection on your glasses. You want to make sure that you have an adjustment so that because people love looking at your lovely eyes. And the best way to do that is to have good lighting. Make sure that you adjust it. Something else, because I'm a geek. Yes, I must say this. I have a light stand, but something else you want to make sure is you want to have external hard drive. This one was a little bit out of reach. An external hard drive, because even though a lot of these sites house your stuff on cloud, wouldn't it be nice to have control of your own? Which means you want to have a backup in case something happens. You'll be able to back up your storage. That's the IT side of me. You've got to make sure that you back up. And you also want to make sure, because we have so many USBs and all this other kind of stuff plugged in, your phone, your camera and your light, your camera and your microphone has to be plugged in directly to your laptop in order for it to work at its optimal use. Sometimes you can plug things up in an external USB. That's those points where they have this, where you can plug in more than one USB. That's called a hub. So you want to make sure that you have a little hub, because you want to make sure that you have your stuff set up. I'll tell you about, I had a laptop earlier that was constantly losing internet connection, was constantly going off of Zoom. And you have to know your equipment, especially if you decide that you're going to do that. Think about the type of equipment you need, because you want to support it. And as someone once told me, you never want your guests, you don't want to tell your guests, hey, well, I'm not really prepared for this and blah, blah, blah. So you want to look as professional as possible. Now, I'm going to ask, any questions so far?
Yes, let me start with the question that came in a few moments ago. And that is a question that is asking, are there any benefits to doing a live show? Are there any benefits to doing a live show?
Sure, you can do a live show. And like I said, though, you want to make sure that whoever your guest is, or if you're doing it by yourself, you want to make sure that everything runs smoothly. You see a lot of the younger people, they do live shows, but guess what? They also splice stuff together. So you can do a live show, and if you think about some of the things that could go wrong, as I mentioned earlier, I was doing a workshop and my wall fell from behind me. You know, do you really want your audience to see that? Not really. I mean, it was funny. It was funny as heck because my husband was laughing himself off and other people on there. But do you really want to present that to your audience? Do you think about that? Do you really want to present to your audience a mistake that you've made? Let's say you're out somewhere doing a live shot and you're walking but not paying attention to where you're going, and you should happen to fall and hurt yourself. I suggest record it because it's easier to edit as opposed to live, because once you present it live, you're like, you can't take anything back. And like I mentioned, I had a guest that was calling people's names that were executives of record companies, and there were some things, and I'd really rather not have somebody give me a call and say, hey, you besmirched me on your show. And, you know, so that's my suggestion. But if you want to go live, go at it.
Great. And thanks, Calvin, for that question, by the way. And Sonia, I think that was great feedback, especially with being live. I know everyone, for the time that I've been doing the D103 Senior Advisor webinar series, it's live. Once it's recorded, it's recorded. I do not go back and edit. The kickoff session, I believe we started with my teleseminar account, my free conference call account, which is what I was using before. And we kicked it off in December, and that free conference call website and the service was janky. It was bad, but I said, listen, it's not being edited. We got the real deal. Content is still there. So if you go out and you look at any of the previously recorded D103 Senior Advisor Webinar Series sessions, you will start to see a change in lighting, a change in technology, a change over the course of the time. So don't think that you need to have everything perfect. Use it as a learning experience. Even today, I had to make certain it was being recorded. So it's always an opportunity to keep learning. And my webinar series is slightly different than a podcast, although I think they have the same type of concept. And that is, you're putting out live content and you're posting it so people can see it. If you do have the ability to go in and edit and fix it, as Ansonia was saying, that's great. Yet you might decide to use the raw footage, which is what I typically do. So thanks again. Now, Ansonia, there is a question that came in from Joyce. Joyce Lewis is asking, can you give examples of lighting to purchase, external drives to purchase, and headphones to purchase? And I would imagine with your response, it'll depend on budget or preference.
Yeah, that is what I say. Get what you can afford now, because my initial project and what I was thinking about doing as far as gospel music is, I have a lot of gospel musicians who are friends, and I wanted to go out and do a documentary. I wanted to video them. And of course, you know, that takes some expensive equipment. However, I couldn't get that right then. And I was getting a little discouraged and despondent. And my husband kept saying, when are you going to get started? And I'm like, well, I don't have the equipment. I don't have the camera. I don't have this. But, and I will say, the Lord speaks to me and he said, if you start, I'll help you get what you need. And I'm like, well, okay. So I went out and I bought a camera that I could afford, which is, this is less than $300, a nice digital camera where I wanted to do my digital, but cameras can go up to $7,000, $8,000. And that's for a medium. They have more that are more expensive when you think about cameras. Whatever your budget can afford is what you can get to start off. If you'll listen to some of my earlier shows, you'll hear me talking before the show even starts because I didn't know how to work the editing. So yes, it is. We're not going to be perfect. We're going to learn as we grow. And I always suggest get what you can afford. My camera that I bought, the external camera I bought a cheap one. At first, it was like $13 or $14 on Amazon. And I'm thinking this is better than the one on my laptop. And it wasn't. It was horrible. But it was better than the one on the laptop. I had to make a decision. So you can gradually grow up to some items. Currently, what I'm using now, I didn't put my light up that I purchased. That light was like $30, but you can get more. I purchased, because Calvin does a different type of show than I do. For Christmas, I bought him a lighting set. And this is a professional photographer's lighting set that it was a nice chunk of change to get that lighting set. So whatever you can afford at the time. Someone did mention a ring light. Ring lights are pretty cheap and they're not that expensive. The light that I got was less than $40. The microphone I got, the external USB microphone I got this on sale. It was regular $150 and I got it on sale for like $75. So it depends on your budget. And that's why I'm telling people, don't go out and super spend, because you'll gradually grow up to it. And if you have something that is valuable, I think if you look at, and what I did in my research is I just looked at different people and what they were talking about. And of course, some of the people, they talk about the Yeti mic, which is the best mic, but Yetis can be expensive. Anything can be expensive. So you find what fits in your budget, what works on your equipment. I purchased the first microphone that I purchased, I plugged it into my laptop and it crashed the whole laptop. So, you have to think about the type. I don't know what kind of equipment you have. So you have to think about those things. When you plug something in, is it going to crash? Is it going to freeze? And luckily I have a resource that before I go on to present, as far as in Zoom or as far as my podcast, I have someone that I can bounce those ideas off. Schedule time, I have to do that. I have to see when Calvin has time in his schedule and I have time, and we sit down and test things out and we try to figure out what works, what doesn't work, what can be done and what can't be done. Can we, do this or can we do that? So you have to think about those things and test them out. I don't want to, because I don't have a sponsorship, I'm not trying to be funny, but a lot of people who have sponsorships, of course, they're going to tell you the kind of stuff like I was talking about the Yeti. And if they have sponsorship with Yeti. So they're going to tell you Yeti, you go out and buy a Yeti, plug it into your system, and it might blow the whole thing up. As not blow it up in a sense of explosion, but it might knock out one of your sound cards or something like that. So like I said, test things out. I can't recommend anything because I don't know what kind of equipment you have. So just test what you can. Find something that is within your budget. Don't go for broke when you first start out, because you're still going to try to learn. When you think of sound systems and what have you, I bought some external, I didn't talk about this one, but I bought some external mics. External speakers, because my old laptop would crash whenever I had Zoom going more than 10 minutes. So what I started doing was I would do my Zoom session through my iPad, but I will plug in my external speakers so that I can make sure that I get a good crisp recording of my guest. So you may have to do that. So I was able to record from my iPad because I couldn't do it on my laptop. So in that sense, I hope I answered that question, but don't go for broke. Please don't go for broke, because you can go and buy this expensive stuff and it'll blow out what you already have. Something I used to tell the principals and superintendents, we cannot put new equipment on a system that was built in 1990. So we need to upgrade the equipment to support what you have now. So, and think about that. Some people are still running on Windows 7, but I won't get too techy. I promise I won't. But you have to know what you can support.
Joyce put a comment in the chat box and she lets you know that, yes, you did answer her question.
Okay.
Calvin also put a comment in the chat box where he encouraged us to feel free to do research. You know, we can get items from Amazon, and if it doesn't work out, it is okay to return it or get a refund if necessary. So that's something to consider. And I also see that Dr. Jan put a comment in the chat box as well, and Sonia, and she put her comment in regarding live shows. Dr. Jan says she does live shows, which allows people to ask questions and give comments. And she can also determine whether or not she airs those questions and comments. So I think that was great feedback that goes in alignment with when you were discussing live shows and the options to do those.
Okay. If you're thinking about being a YouTuber, you want to sign into a YouTube account, because now YouTube and Google are together. A lot of people didn't know that they were a joint company. I didn't realize that people didn't know that. You go to your channel. Now, here's something about YouTube and Google. You can separate them. Let's say you want to do 2 types of shows. You can create 2 different channels. You can create 2 different email addresses and set those up. So you can do an investigation in that, create your channel, and then start posting your information if you want to be a YouTuber. And then you fill out your details and you're done. As far as podcasting, you want to find a host. There are a few platforms out there that are free for a trial period. Some that are free that are not very supportive in the sense of, if you want to expand, you can always transition. So if you start off on a free platform, you can always transition that to another platform. It's a process, but you can change that, and you can talk to them about it. You can upload it to a web host. Someone like Buzzsprout, they charge $10 to $25 per month. Some companies, I think Spreaker charges like $7 to $15 a month. So you think about your budget. Don't let somebody else tell you what you need to spend. You think about your budget. Always keep that in mind. What you can afford. Do not go into the hole with doing anything. You want to make sure that this is something that you can budget for. Think about your materials that you need. And then with the ease of a website, some of the podcasts have their own website. They have their own supports. They can help you with the social media tools. I always suggest reviewing the information that they give you. Utilize the support that they have for you, especially if this is something new that you're doing. Make sure that that's why those techs get paid. You know, talk to them, find out what is best, what will best suit you, and indicate you want to talk about step by step. When you think about YouTube, when you think about podcasts, choose the topic and name. That's before you even get started. Create your show in an episode format. For a podcast, each show has cover art. Think about your cover art, but you want to make sure that it is unique. Please don't copy somebody else's stuff. Make sure that it is unique. If you use intro and outro music, they have free sites that will do that. If you're not a musician yourself, or if you don't have a musician friend that can do that for you, there are a lot of free sites out there when you're looking for music. If you're thinking about transition music or music to do your intro, there are a lot of free sites. Investigate that. And then think about as I said, about your equipment selection. You want to make sure that you are not going for broke. Whatever you can afford. And then when you can step up, then the better it can go. Kelvin said something about baby face. And then I like to do the recording because sometimes things do happen. And I'm not sure how many were on when I first, when Cassandra was talking, I had already started interviewing my guests when I realized I hadn't even hit record. So I had to ask my guests, can we start over? And we have to have the same enthusiasm as when we first started the interview. So you think about that. And then you want to submit to podcast platforms. Currently, my show I found out, is on 12 platforms. There were a couple of platforms I didn't even know were there. So and some of your podcast hosts will assist you with putting your podcast out on different channels, etc. And you want to promote your show. Who's promoting their show? Me. Because while we're talking about this, I'm also promoting my show. So you want to make sure, because you want this. Now, this is something that I didn't realize until recently, is that I was asking people to listen to the show, but I never said subscribe. And when people subscribe to the show, they don't have to reach out to you and say, hey, when's your next show? If you ask people to subscribe to your show, then, or even to your YouTube channel, every time something posts, they'll be notified. So that is one thing off of your plate, where you don't have to send out emails to people, hey, my show posted, blah, blah, blah. So subscribe. You ask people to subscribe. And then you want to make sure that you complete your details. Now, I talked about monetization earlier. And I want to tell you a bit about how to monetize, because I'm still trying to figure this out myself. When I said, how can I monetize? Well, what you do in monetizing your show is, one, find a host. Maybe there's a company out there that wants to get the word out about their product. And in order to help you support your show, pay for the fees or etc., maybe you can ask someone, hey, would you be a sponsor for my show? One of my girlfriends who recently passed was in Atlanta, and she happened to come to Chicago and visit, and we were hanging out. And at that time, Calvin was doing his show on intellectual radio, and she is in PR, and she had just started her PR firm. And her and Calvin got to talking, and she said, hey, can I be a sponsor? How much would it cost me to sponsor your show? So he told her how much, he paid to do his show, because anytime you do your show, you got to pay some money out. And she then contributed some money to sponsor. So she did a commercial, so that every time that commercial played, she gave him a percentage, because it was advertising her company. Those are some things that you can talk to someone about who may have a business. And then think about the pace. You don't want to do a sales every time, even when you're a professional speaker, even when you're a YouTuber or a podcaster. You don't want to say that every time, about a product or something like that. You want to get the word out, but you don't want to browbeat people. Remember, I talked about that salesperson? You really don't want to be that way, because you want people to enjoy what you're putting out. And then how you capitalize on it, and I mentioned this as well, if you have recordings and you want to give out information. Cassandra and I had a conversation, I'm going to say about 2 months ago, and talked about what you can do to give people something free. And think about these things, because when you give someone something free, they're going to want to know more about you. They're going to want to know more about what you're talking about or what you're presenting. And you think about these things and you say, hey, I can monetize on that, and not from the people necessarily that are doing something free, but you can get monetization out of that, because then they'll then tell someone else who may be interested, who may have a product, and they say, hey, I have this product. Can you advertise it on your show? Sure, I can advertise it on my show. And since it costs me X amount of dollars to present this, maybe I'll, if you give me a stipend, I'll put it that way, give me a stipend or a donation. That's how you monetize. And that way someone can help you with the product. And then you can upgrade your equipment. You think of it that way. So think about the different ways. If you have a course, some people are doing courses. If you have a course, write a workbook. or create a course. And think about how you can get that out there so that people are interested in what you have, what you're presenting to people. And then, or what you can do. And Cassandra, this is a perfect time to drop that freebie. I have actually two freebies. One of my guests that'll be coming up this week that's going to be featured, his name is Earl Thomas. He used to play for Motown. He was one of the guitarists at Motown, and he has turned his life over to Christ. And back in the 70s is when he made his transition. So we had a conversation and we were talking, and during the interview and after the interview, he sent me an email and said, is it okay if I offer your listeners something free? And I said, of course, I don't have a problem with that. So what Cassandra is going to put in the chat box is the free offer from my guest, Earl Thomas. And I really enjoyed interviewing him and talking with him. And he was so excited about it that when he went, like I said, after the interview, he wanted to keep the conversation going. And right now, I am going to show you what I spoke about this, and the reason why I believe that we're talking about these is to learn what we're doing in our presentations and our presentation skills. And I'm going to show you my brand. Do you see my brand? This is my show, Let's Talk Gospel Music Gold. And I present that. This is one of the cover pages that I have. And with that, I am also giving a free gift. My first season, if Cassandra could put that in the chat as well. These are PDFs. My first season of my guests, as I tell you, I was a little overwhelmed and I was excited that I was able to interview. I started my podcast in September, was my very first podcast that I posted, and I post once a week. I was able to interview 23 people. A lot of them I think you've heard of or maybe seen, heard their voices. And I am giving you the show list of everyone that I interviewed for my first season. And there's also a link to either their show or some of the work that they've done. And that way you can see what I've been working on as far as a podcaster. And like I said, I've been excited. I feel that I've been blessed because a majority of actually everybody I've asked to be on the show has said yes. And they've shared their story. And I hope that you enjoy listening to it. My show is called Let's Talk Gospel Music Gold. And I like to present that to you as a free gift. My first season. And also the last one is Calvin is doing a free webinar. And Cassandra is going to drop that in the chat box as well. So if you download the information and you have that, that is great. That is fantastic. I want to say that I appreciate Cassandra for even considering me. She doesn't know that I like to take a challenge. And when they sent the list out for people to present at the workshops, and that was one that was not related to Toastmasters. And I said, I'm going to challenge myself and learn how to be a YouTuber, how to be a podcaster. And I was so motivated by the information that I found that I said, let me put my hand at it. Because after I did the presentation at the TLI, one of the people asked me, where's your show? And I said, I don't have one. But then it made me investigate further. And as I said, that was the result, is I was able to present, and I started my show in September and have been blessed to continue. And I have some wonderful shows that are in line even now. So thank you all so much. If you have any questions, we've got a few minutes for questions, I think.
We do, and Sonia, we have about 3 minutes left. There looks to be a question that came in from James Hammond. He asked the question about, what do you do to maximize viewers? What do you do to maximize viewers?
And that is where I said to subscribe. That's what I was missing. The subscribe, and to tell it everywhere you go. Let people know about your product. You can do sponsorships. You can do ads. I know Facebook posts on there all the time. You can do an ad to boost your show. And if I'm not mistaken, because I have not boosted one of my shows, because I didn't want one guest to think that I was boosting it over another. But Calvin has boosted his show, and his listenership had grown. So you can do a special show or a special presentation. Go on Facebook, because of course, go on the social media, and you want to make sure that you're on social media: Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, on what's the other one? Did I say them all? No. I'm forgetting a couple of platforms.
Maybe LinkedIn, maybe.
Yeah, you can even do LinkedIn, and you can actually find, as in regard to your topic, you can actually do a search. I say go Google, and you'll find it more. So if you have a topic on, like, I know that Sharon is a florist by heart, and maybe she'll want to do a show about floral arrangement, horticultural, and I can't say that word correctly, but do a search and find out, and then join groups like on Facebook, join groups, and then you're able to expose a larger audience. Like, I'm part of the Gospel Music Workshop of America. They allow me to post my presentations. I'm also in a group called, CMC Fan Club, Chicago Mass. So I post there. So I post on various sites that allow me. So some sites do allow you to post on their site. So once your podcast or your YouTube comes out, you can post, and the author of that group or author of that page, they're the ones that make the final decision. So you have a discussion with them, and they'll allow you to post there.
Everyone, I do notice we have at least 2 more questions in the chat box, which means it's going to put us past our 4:30 time to end. If you are okay with seeing for Ansonia to answer those questions, I want to make certain that we don't leave without getting those questions answered. So why don't we go ahead right now? Ansonia, there's a question that came in about presentation. Let's see here. It was about guests. Where do you get your guests from? And then the other question was a question about, do you cross promote with your guests?
Actually, I do. I have been fortunate enough to just reach out to people, which is really interesting. I've gone through Messenger and reached out to people, send them a message. I introduce myself and let them know how they may or may not know me. And I talk to them. So I do a search. It's almost like I stalk people. I go on Google or I go on Facebook. I'm not on Instagram. That's the other one. I'm not on Instagram or Twitter, but some of my guests are. And I have contacted them and said, I'd like to speak to so-and-so. There is a guest, and I think I'm going to divulge this one because I'm really looking for her. There was this lady called Maggie Bell that had a group called Maggie Bell and the Voice and Maggie Bell Singers. Well, she used to be a featured soloist for the Thompson Community Choir back in the 60s and 70s. And I finally found someone who knew her. So what I've done was reached out to them to get information and talk to them. I have a set email that I send out to invite my guests to. So once I get their email address, I send them this static email that invites them to my show, ask them if they're interested in being in the show, and I give them a date because I look on my schedule and see how I'm going to book that show. And if they respond to me with, yes, I'd like to be a guest on your show, I then send them an email thanking them for accepting to be a guest. And on this date, please send me your bio and your headshot. I need it by this date, and send that information out. I get a response back from them with their headshot, their bio. I'm not going to tell you that it's easy to get that sometimes, because sometimes people don't get it to me right away, but I tell them it is imperative that I have that information, because my style is I like to have a conversation. I don't do the, ask a question, get an answer, ask a question, get an answer. I like to go with the flow of what we're talking about. Yes, I do have some questions based on the bio that they give me, but I can do that with someone. It was very difficult to talk with them, so I had to create a different style. And the other thing is word of mouth. There's some gentlemen that I know that know other people. And I said, well, I've been trying to get in contact with X, Y, and Z. And they say, oh, I'll tell them to give you a call. And that's how I've gotten in contact with them.
Great.
But it's diligent work, doing some research, finding out who I want to talk to. And as a matter of fact, my guest, Earl Thomas, he sought me out, which was really interesting. So some people might seek you, and it's because he has a new product coming out and he wanted to get the word out. And I'll actually talk about his experience as a gospel musician.
And Sonia, this is our final question. And I believe you may have mentioned this before, yet if you could repeat it again, which podcast platform do you use?
Okay, I use Anchor.fm, and I will be making a transition, but Anchor has really been good to me. I started off with the free package, so and working up, and I am now, like I said, I'm on 12 platforms that I initially thought I was only on 9. I am also heard on iHeartRadio. I am on Google Play, and I am on Apple Podcasts. So those are some of the bigger ones. Thank you so much, Rick. I see you. So, and
yeah, those are great platforms. Spotify, Cashbox, a lot of them, because I think I'm on 15 of them. So they're very, very good. And also YouTube. So puts you on it too, and then it broadens your audience base too. So yeah, you're great.
Thank you so much. Oh yeah, and I'm on Spotify too. So yeah, that's what I started out with. I did put my email address in there if anybody's interested in talking to me more. I didn't put now I do have a separate email address for my show. Let's Talk Gospel Music Gold.
Can you drop that into the chat box for them and repost again your email address, so that way it'll be toward the end of the chat? Speaking of chat, everyone, as Sonia is putting in her contact information, feel free to make certain that you save the chat. There have been attachments placed in there, information put in there, links, websites, suggestions. Use the 3 dots if you're familiar with where to save the chat, or I should say, if you're not familiar with how to save the chat, what we're doing is we're taking a look where you would type in your comment. You'll see where it says everyone. Across from there should be a symbol for file and the phrase file. So a symbol to attach a document and the word file, and directly to the right of file, you'll see 3 dots. Click the 3 dots. The first option should be save the chat, and that should give you the ability to save the chat. I noticed in the chat box, there were questions that came in about the attachments. Will you be able to receive the attachments? Absolutely. I noticed when I was putting in some of the attachments inside of the chat box, a few of them were taking a little bit longer to upload. I have double checked. I do believe they are still there. However, to be on the safe side, when I email you the link for the recording, I'm also going to make certain that I resend or I provide to you all of the attachments that Sonia has shared. And I have to say, Listen, members of District 103 Toastmasters, you all are a talented bunch of individuals. And if it was not for this session today, and yes, I'm scrolling through the chat box to eyeball those of you that put in websites and speaker sheets and information about your podcast. We have more of you out there doing these things than we even knew of. So don't be surprised if sometime in the near future, I come sending you an email saying, hello there. Would you like to be a featured guest on this D103 Senior Advisor webinar series? Because you have so much that I think you could share with our members from your experience. That's what everyone has been doing so far. I want to thank Ansonia again for sharing her experience, for taking that webinar, or for taking, I should say, that session she did in the June TLI and bringing it here to answer those questions. Now, I recognize we are over. Michelle, I see right now, Michelle, go ahead and unmute. I see your hand is raised. Michelle Brock.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So I've been on the Zoom this entire time on my phone. So I'm aware of how to capture the details of the chat and also the downloads when I'm at my desktop, but I'm unable to get all of that stuff from my phone. Is there any way, can you download the chat and just email me the notepad and I can figure everything out from there? And you're already gonna capture the attachments, right?
Sure, you're testing my skills. I will definitely do that. This is a challenge for me to do as well. So I will make certain, because I know for sure it'll save to my computer. I'll be able to send that over to you as a document. I'll see if I can turn it into a PDF. Maybe it'll be easier to actually email. Yet, thanks for asking that question. And I'll be sure to get that to you, Michelle.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Oh yeah, the
yeah.
techie head in me says your iPad and your phone do not function as a laptop. I think I sent you a message one time, Cassandra. I was like, oh my God, I didn't know I could get all this because I was using my iPad and my phone so much. But they're limited in what they can and cannot see. So just to let people know that if they cannot see it, it could possibly be you're on your tablet or your phone.
All right. Well, everyone, this was a Sunday that we spent time together. This was a Sunday where you inspired us by your presence, your questions, your suggestions, and again, I'm going to say, and your talent. As a senior advisor for District 103, we are constantly looking for ways to be able to showcase our members and give you an opportunity to shine. So no, I was not joking when I said that I will be reaching out to some of you, like I'm gonna put her on the spot right now. Amy Sagami, TEDx webinar at some point soon. Dr. Jan Fortman, I'm putting you on the spot too right now. Author, book, sometime the podcast. And now, Natalie, I'm gonna put you on the spot too. You were putting in the chat box, especially that speaker sheet. So I'll figure some things out. Those are just some ideas tossing out right now. Exactly when we'll make it happen, we'll get through those details. But I'm telling you, members of District 103 Toastmasters, keep sharing, keep doing what you're doing. We appreciate the support. And if you can, pass this recording on to someone that you know in your club or even outside of your club who could benefit from becoming a professional speaker, a podcaster, and a YouTuber. Everyone, I want to thank you for being with us today. We'll see you this time next month for our next session, which will be on an inside look at club elections. Everyone, happy Sunday. See you next month. Take care.